Good afternoon. Welcome to the Six Steel City Rings podcast. I'm LeeAnn Lohman. I'm here today with Zach Franciscus and Bob Quinn. How's everyone doing?
Wonderful.
Feeling a little rainy, but good.
Yeah, I was going to say all three of us in Florida, so incredibly dedicated to our craft. We are all here under hurricane conditions to bring you the show today. So if you hear crazy noise in the background, it's probably my dog Bentley losing his mind or Zach's cat. You never know. The Steelers are prepping for week 4 right now. We are currently sitting at 0-3, 2 games atop the AFC North, which is wild, crazy, and amazing. So everybody's in a good mood right now. We head to Indianapolis to face the Colts in what's a little bit of a revenge game since they got the best of us last year in a big way when we had Mitch Trubisky at quarterback. So I'll be looking forward to that this week. We'll be previewing the game in just a little bit. As far as news, it's been a lot of injuries kind of dominating the news talk this week. Terrell Austin said today that he expects that we'll see Terrell Edmonds sooner rather than later. They have not activated him yet, even though they brought the former Steeler back to the team. But now with injuries to Corey Trice, they'll be looking at possibly bringing him back sooner. As for other injuries, the injury report came out this afternoon. It's Thursday right now while we're filming, so the injury report came out this afternoon. Jaylen Warren, Alex Highsmith, McCole Pruitt all did not practice due to injuries. Miles Killebrew, Cam Hayward, Cordarrelle Patterson, Najee Harris, Deshaun Jackson all did not practice due to senior status. Big kids don't always have to practice, so they had the day off today, not injury related, although Jackson is recovering from Elliott is recovering from a quadricep injury. As far as limited, Russell Wilson and Isaac Seumalo were both limited. It sounded like, from what was on Twitter from Brooke Pryor and those who were there, sounded like he was practicing more than he had other days, so that's good news. I know Russell Wilson keeps saying he's closer to being ready to play. It sounds like Isaac Seumalo is also. Roman Wilson was a full participant, as was Van Jefferson. So that was good to hear. I'll be curious to see. We'll talk about Roman Wilson a little bit later. So that kind of leads us in with all that injury talk, kind of leads us into some talk about Russell Wilson that's been going around the, league, around the Steeler Nation right now, about possibly trading Russ and if he's going to ever become a starter and what happens if he activates his giant PR machine. How will that look in Pittsburgh? Right now, it appears that Justin Fields will be starting week 4, but will we ever see Russell play? What do you guys think?
I think that, and I brought it up, I think a week or so ago or something. My question with trading Russell Wilson is, what kind of value can we get for Russell right now? Because I think of his own fault, because of him trying to save face, he's actually hurt his draft value a little bit, because everyone kind of already knew about the Russell Wilson PR machine, like you were talking about. And I think it's been in full swing, specifically because we haven't seen a lot of reports on Russell Wilson. To me, the lack of reporting on Russell Wilson kind of means that people are out there making sure that only positive or ones they can't control are coming out. So the question with this is, are we looking to trade a classic car, or are we trying to offload a lemon, is what I keep saying. And I don't know with this one. I think right now the NFL sees him as a lemon, no matter if Omar Khan's got Claypool to look like a classic car. I don't think we can pull that off again.
And you look at places like Miami where there's rumors. I think Huntley got named the starter today, which is not surprising at all compared with Skylar Thompson and Nick Boyle. Although I guess they were more impressed with Boyle than Thompson. Who knows? But I don't know. If Huntley plays decent for Miami, I don't know that they go sacrificing draft picks and all that to go after Russell Wilson. Maybe if he plays and the offense is still stuck in the mud, maybe they pull the trigger of that. But there's not a lot of destinations right now for Wilson to go. And ultimately, the Steelers got a good deal. Florio likes to talk about his PR machine, but he also likes to make the point that Russell Wilson made a huge mistake by signing a minimum contract with the Steelers, because now there is no incentive to trade Russell Wilson.
Right.
If you could maybe recoup the draft pick that you gave up with Justin Fields, then okay, maybe I could see that logic. But let's face it, Fields has never played 17 games in a season. I think 16 is a top, but he usually misses 3 or 4 games. If it becomes a situation, and Russell Wilson, I would think if he was smart, would look at it this way. If I know, like if I was backing up Ben, I know I'm going to play a game or two a year. And if I'm auditioning for the rest of the league, I'm going to get put in the best possible position with a stacked defense to win the game and maybe look good enough to where I can get a contract in the offseason. I know there's a rumor flying around. I think we've got some stuff on it that Justin Fields supposedly is willing to do a 2-year, $50 million extension. I don't know how true that is, but if it is true, the Steelers should do it immediately.
Sign it immediately. Zach and I talked about this earlier, that whole thing that we don't sign people during the season. I always kind of assumed that was a Colbert thing. Zach, so Zach and I were talking about that before. So like a lot of things have changed since Omar Khan has taken over. And I realize that may still not be the precedent you want to set, but what was the year you said, Zach, was the last time we signed somebody in season or extended somebody in season?
Since 1995, we've only negotiated with one player in season, and that was safety Darren Perry. Other than that, and 95 was, when did Colbert start? Because 95 was that sounds like right about when?
Well, I could tell you the origin of it real quick. Eric Green became a distraction at the beginning of the season, and Dan Rooney gave in and signed him before the season started. And then basically,
it's a Rooney thing.
It's definitely a Dan Rooney thing. It was a Dan Rooney rule. He did it, and he said he'd never do it again. Obviously, Darren Perry is the exception to the rule.
Colbert took over as the GM in 2010. He was the Steelers director of football operations from 2000 to 2010, and then took over in 2010 as the GM.
Yeah, and I know. Rooney said he always regretted.
Yeah,
because after he signed Eric Green, I think he almost immediately got hurt, and then that was pretty much it for Eric Green as a Steeler. And he ended up a couple years later having a good year with Miami.
And the rule never surprised me because I don't like distractions, and I think the Steelers do such a phenomenal job of minimizing those and not creating drama as much as possible. And so the rule has never surprised me. But if this is a conversation where it's, Justin's in agreement, the Rooneys and Mike Tomlin and Omar are in agreement, and we come up with this number that looks like $50 million or something that everybody thinks is fair, then you just kind of quietly sign a deal and keep moving on. It doesn't have to be this elaborate out loud contract negotiation for the world to hear. You know what I mean? I think if it was something like that, maybe they would consider that, especially if it fiscally, financially works in the best interest of the team.
And it almost runs contradictory. I'm sure you guys heard the Doug Whaley nonsense where he was like, oh, they might go in, Omar might go into Art and say, hey, do we really want this guy to play himself into a $40-50 million contract? I mean, I threw something at the radio.
Take. And I usually like Doug Whaley. That was about one of the worst takes I've heard in a long time because it's just so contradictory to everything the Steelers do. It's like, you don't know us. How did you used to work for the team? Like, we don't tank for draft picks. We don't lose intentionally. We're not going to bench a player and be okay with losing, so we pay him less money next year. Like, get out of here. Like, that's not how we operate.
And not to mention the fact that if it turns out, sorry, Zach, if it turns out that we traded a 4th-round pick for a franchise quarterback, it's the steal of the century. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Zach.
Oh, no, you're good, because Mark Caboli was back out on Wednesday on the Joe Starkey show. I don't know if he's part of the Russell Wilson PR team, but my goodness,
he must get a kickback from Russ because it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. He said, I don't think Justin Fields is going to be the starter for the rest of the year. I think Russell Wilson will get in there, and it's not going to be because of Justin Fields' injury. It's going to be some ineffectiveness. That sounds like he's rooting for Justin Fields to play badly. He's not saying it outright, but so where's all this coming from? I don't understand the vitriol, even if it's hidden, against Justin Fields, considering that most of the Steeler fans that I've talked to agreed last week was some of the best quarterback play we've seen in Pittsburgh since Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah.
And I don't understand where these expectations are coming from.
I don't know how LeeAnn feels about it, but what a change in tune from Kaboli. Because if you remember, before they got Russell Wilson, he was the biggest voice out there saying, "Don't go get him. He stinks.
Yeah.
He hasn't played
He's
good
drama.
in 4 years.
He's a diva." Yeah.
Yeah. And now all of a sudden, Kaboli's on the Russell Wilson train when Justin Fields is playing great. It's like maybe McAfee was like, "Hey, intentionally say wrong stuff so Belichick can correct you."
Maybe it's in his McAfee contract.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was interesting because you brought up the PR machine earlier from Florio, and he said that at one point, I think it was yesterday morning, and then by yesterday afternoon, he was on 93.7 kind of retracting his own statement about how if Russ does activate his PR machine and goes into Mike Tomlin, it's going to blow up in his face. Like anytime players have done that and tried to go in with the ultimatums, you know what I mean? It blows up in their face. And so he said, he feels like his best bet would be to go, if he wants to leave, would be to go in as the like volunteers, not hostages. Do you know what I mean? And if you don't need me, then let me go. But I don't understand why it's remotely in the Steelers' best interest to let Russell Wilson go, unless you're getting some crazy wide receiver in return, some really high draft pick in return. I mean, otherwise you've got like the best backup quarterback in the entire NFL right now. He's won a Super Bowl. Like, that's not something that usually happens. You know what I mean? He's a solid game manager. So if he's healthy, I mean, we've got an ideal situation. So I don't know why the Steelers would get rid of him. And I said this to you guys when we talked the other day, that I think in some ways it benefits Russ to kind of ride the year out. Do you know what I mean? I think at the end of the year, even if he doesn't really play or he only plays a little bit for Fields, then I think he can say, look, I got hurt. You can't control that. Things happen. I'm healthy now. They have to go with the hot hand. I totally understand that. I was a team player, did everything I could to support Justin. And but I want my shot. And so I'm out here now advocating for myself to get my shot. Yeah, and who can say you were terrible? You haven't even seen him play.
And let's face it, I mean, you can accuse Russell Wilson of a lot of things, being fake and maybe not the greatest teammate, according to people who played with him. Or you can't accuse him of being dumb. And I think it would be incredibly dumb for him to come out and try to force. Now, I do think it could possibly leak out where, maybe week 7, week 8, and Chris Muller kind of made this point the other day. Maybe week 7, week 8, this is kind of these next 2 weeks are really the end of the, okay, my calf hurts.
Right.
Because it's just not going to get believable after a couple of months. So this decision is coming. And if it leaks out that all of a sudden, hey, Russell's well enough to play, but the Steelers are saying he's still hurt, well, then we know where that came from. Yeah. That came from the hype machine. But I think it's dumb if he does that, because if he's trying to force, like you said, LeeAnn, if he's trying to force Mike Tomlin's hand, whoa, is he in for a surprise?
Yeah. That kind of leads us to a little bit of talk about what's been going on with the offensive line. So Justin Fields has been playing really well. We've also had some injuries to the offensive line with Isaac Seumalo being out. Spencer Anderson has stepped up to the plate. He's done, I think, a really good job for a kid who's in his second year that really hasn't seen any professional time until he took over. I think he's done a good job. Now Troy Faltanu's out for the foreseeable future. I think what I heard last was that he might make it back for the playoffs if we make it there. So he's out for the foreseeable future. Spencer Anderson told the media earlier this week or last week that he was taking reps at right tackle. So I'm assuming that's for him to be the swing person, or maybe Broderick is not performing well. What do you guys think about the way the offensive line looked last week? It seemed like Broderick Jones settled down a little bit from that rough game he had.
Well, I mean, Broderick Jones might have had the most important thing of the game. He hurt Joey Bosa.
Yeah.
That's true. And I feel like we're in a kind of a good place where we really don't have much of a say. We cannot like the offensive line situation, but we no longer have that extra guy who we're hoping will get into the lineup. The Fautanu thing is now done, so we might not like the situation where it's Dan Moore and Broderick, but if last week is what we can expect as a baseline for them to improve from going forward, I'm okay with that. There was
What's
no,
Bob going to
they didn't
complain
have
about
clean
now?
pockets. Exactly. So we're not going to have anything. Well, we can still complain about that. Who knows what Calvin Anderson can come in, and we can have a double Anderson kind of controversy going on. We'll find some way to be upset about this.
Too many Andersons, too many Wilsons. It's too confusing.
Yeah, and as far, I mean, let's face it, did Denmore play a great game? I mean, no, he played an okay game. I thought he played much better in the second half.
Yeah.
I think the first half there were some glaring. Khalil Mack jumped off the screen, beating him a couple of times. But at this point, your only other option is Spencer Anderson, who has never played a snap at tackle in the NFL. He did pretty good when they threw him in at guard, but I mean, I don't think there's any way that they are looking at Spencer and Anderson as a viable option to replace Broderick and have Broderick move over to left. I don't even think they consider it, even if Dan Moore gets two quarterbacks killed.
Yeah.
Because I just can't see throwing Anderson out there. The one thing I would say with Isaac, and I heard Jeff Hathorn right before we started recording, saying he doesn't think Isaac's all the way there. It's close. It could happen over the weekend where he gets close enough where they activate him, but he thinks it'll still be another week that we won't see him till Dallas.
I'd rather not rush him, frankly. I mean, we're up, you know what I mean, 3 games right now. I'd rather not rush him. I think Anderson's done fine.
Well, we
rather
did see
him getting like more seriously injured. He's not 25.
Right. I thought it was Mason only played jumbo packages, Mason McCormick last week. But when I went back and watched it, I mean, there was a couple times they put him in at guard. So, he's holding up. But I think they realize that McCormick is better, and Isaac is our best offensive lineman.
Yes.
I mean, if he thinks he can go, I think our training staff is going to be smart. If he's not 100%, they're not going to let him. But with that pectoral, they have experience with TJ in the pectoral. I think they know what they're looking for. The sooner he gets back on the field, the better it is for us. I think I'd rather see him in Dallas. The Colts. We'll talk about this more later. I don't know that without DeForest Buckner on the field that we should have a bunch to fear about over their run defense.
Yeah. Is this the same training staff that had Russell Wilson hitting a tackling sled?
According to one person, apparently.
To everybody except Brian Batko.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Well, and LeeAnn, you pointed out that I think it's the Believe guy from Denver.
Yeah,
thinks it was a pre-existing condition.
Yeah, he did say that it was a pre-existing condition. So,
weirdly enough, if it was a pre-existing condition for me, that's even more damning for our training staff. Because shouldn't you know that? Shouldn't you have done?
Right.
So it doesn't look good overall. But what I'm curious about this line, especially with Broderick and Moore, is I don't know what it takes to have the mental makeup to play offensive tackle in the NFL. But I imagine you got to have a pretty strong mental makeup about yourself. I wonder what benefits is going to give these two, because they're both young. They're both still young guys. What to have a couple weeks where people aren't asking for one of them to be replaced by someone, where that talk has died down and they can just do their thing. Where even if they have a rough game, they don't talk about the rough game, not about rough game. Replace them.
I think Marcus Jones needs some security. I agree with you. I don't, you know what I mean? Whatever that looks like, I think he needs to hear like, "Hey, we believe in you. You've got this. You can do this." I think that goes a long way. I mean, I know he had some struggles, but we saw him do it last year. Saw him do it this year. Do you know what I mean? He's capable. So everybody has bad games. I think we need to hope that's what it was and kind of move on from all the talk about switching people in for him.
Right. Well, if you go back and listen to the post-game stuff again, I mean, the guy played where he played bad, and he comes out and he's kind of like, hey, a lot of people killed him for hey, if I'm not starting, I don't think I should be out there. I didn't want to rotate all that stuff. And I get it. And there's been a lot more that's come out about, hey, you don't rotate tackles at the NFL level. It's not you rotate in. It's somebody's hurt, you got to go.
Right.
That's different. But I don't think enough attention has been paid to when he was kind of like, you know what, it's spilt milk. There's no use complaining. I do what I'm told. They call it, I haul it. I mean, I think that was that was mature stuff he didn't get credit for. We're saying, what, hey, look, I'm not in charge. I don't have any choice. I got to do what they tell me. So am I a little bit upset about what happened? Yeah. But am I going to pout? No. And I think we saw that against the Chargers.
So moving on the offense, we have another injury that we want to talk about the impact of, and just kind of this player's play in general so far this year, which has been, I think, less than what all of us would have hoped. And that's Jaylen Warren. He's been battling a soft tissue injury. I think it's his hamstring. Scarily enough, we saw Najee Harris walking around in an arm sling earlier this week. I don't know what that was, but he's apparently fine now. Thank goodness. But Jaylen really hasn't been as involved as you would think. Why do you think that is, Bob?
He's got to be hurt. I know Tomlin has said he doesn't look like himself. And I think at this point, you're kind of looking, if I'm Arthur Smith, I'm looking at this and thinking, you know what? The back half of the schedule is awfully tough, at least as far as on paper. It's starting to not look so tough.
Yeah.
But you don't know that the first week or two. And am I really going to go all out with Jaylen when I trust Cordarrelle Patterson? I know Cordarrelle Patterson, and I think he can approximate it close enough. I don't think he thinks Cordarrelle Patterson is better than Jaylen. I just think the Steelers have been a little coy with just how hurt he was. Because remember when we first heard he hurt the hamstring, we weren't expecting him at the beginning of the season.
Right.
It was a surprise. So, I mean, I don't know. I think it's also an under, something that's not talked about enough is that in pass protection, Jaylen's our best pass protector. It's not that Najee isn't physical. It's not that he's bad at it. Jaylen's just really good at it. So, like when they talked about this weekend with the Chargers, especially the Derwin James blitz where he came untouched and got Justin Fields. And Romo was saying, hey, you can't really blame Jones on that one. Blame Najee Harris. I don't think that Najee was like, oh, well, I'm not paying attention. I'm going out in the pattern. I think Jaylen would have saw, hey, wait a minute. He's coming off the edge. Let me get over there. And he would have made that play. And again, it's not a knock on Najee because he's trying to get out in the pattern and give him an outlet. He just didn't think to swivel back because let's face it. I mean, he hasn't been on the field the last couple of years in those situations.
Right. Do you think that has anything to do with Arthur Smith's play calling, or do you think this is simply just a function of the injury?
Yeah, I really thought Jaylen was going to be a huge part of the game plan against the Chargers in the screen game, and I think we saw one, and then soon after he left the game, and I think the Steelers adjusted. Zach, I don't know. Zach, I know you're a huge Najee fan. Did you have some sympathy for him because he didn't seem comfortable in those little 1-yard screens? Jaylen turns those into 10-yard gains. Najee got punished, it looked like.
Yeah, the thing I like, and I like you brought up Arthur Smith, that's why I'm okay with all of this happening, because it's being done through the lens of Arthur Smith. If it was done through the lens of Matt Canada, my first assumption would be that he forgot Jaylen Warren was on the roster and someone was going to have to remind him. And I really wish that's like a half joke because I don't know how much Matt Canada knew about his players. So with this, I agree. It's a mixture of what Bob said, that I think the injury is much worse, or he re-aggravated it and made it worse at some point. But what's happening now is Najee is absolutely being put in situations he shouldn't be. But when it's not working, we're not calling it again. I saw a toss that did not work. Did not see that play again. Saw a little half screen. Did not work. Did not see that play again. So I think Arthur Smith is seeing things. He's like, hey, listen, this play was for Jaylen, but hey, Najee, we're going to try it one time. It didn't work. And I guarantee Najee goes back to the sideline, just gives Arthur Smith a look, and he's like, he nods and just takes it off of his chart. They're trying things. I think it was LeeAnn or someone who said they're throwing stuff at a wall and trying stuff to see if it works out. And I'm okay with that at this point because we're building an identity. And this is all brand new. The amount of turnover on this offense, including the offensive coordinator, is more than we've seen in Pittsburgh in a long time. And Arthur Smith is navigating it wonderfully, including the Jaylen situation. So I'm okay with Jaylen staying out as long as he needs to, except for, I would say we get to week 8. I want to see Jaylen get a little bit more action going into the bye because we can rest him after that because we're going to need him down that stretch. We're not going to win down the stretch without Jaylen being a part of that 3-headed monster.
As much as I love Jalen, I really do. He's one of my favorite players in the NFL. And he's a guy, and Joe Starkey made this point, where if you go to him and say, "Hey, man, for your own good, you need to sit out," he might punch you in the face.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for their own good, wear the headgear. The running backs coach, Arthur Smith, somebody go tell Jalen, "Hey, man, we love you, but you ain't playing this week."
Yeah. Well, we need him. We need him. It's just that simple. I mean, you're right. We get to the back half of that season. In theory, it's going to be really tough. I know that right now the AFC North is looking wonky, but I fully expect like the Baltimore Ravens to pick up steam as the season goes on. I think the Bengals will get their stuff together, at least to some degree. Unfortunately, the Browns will keep browning.
Yeah.
But we're going to need him when we get to those games. It's not just them that we face. You know, we've got we've got Kansas City. We've got lots of other really tough games coming up. So that leads us into another massive injury that we suffered against the Chargers last week. And that was Alex Highsmith going out with an injury. Man, that one really hurt. But the good news is that unlike any other team in the NFL, we have Nick Herbig, who is ridiculously talented. I know that I feel like Alex does the best at kind of sealing that edge and, you know, against the run. And so I think he's even better than TJ at it. So I'm a little bit concerned at what that looks like. But we certainly saw Herbig step up in a big way. He had a strip sack. And Justin Herbert got, you know, he came in with an injury. His injury got re-aggravated. We didn't hurt him. He went out, and Taylor Heineke came in and he had a sack on him as well. So he had a really big game. I was listening to Cam Hayward's podcast this morning, and he has a new nickname for Nick Herbig. He's calling him the Hawaiian Punch, which I thought was very funny.
Oh, I like that.
I forgot he was from Hawaii.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So we're looking at him this week and kind of roll this into our game preview for the Indianapolis Colts game that's coming up. How do you expect Herbig to fare against the Colts this week?
I'm really excited because from what I've seen from Nick Herbig, it's not just that he hit the ground running, which he did, and I don't think any of us expected to that extent. But whenever he gets something wrong, he works tirelessly to correct it. And I think the more action he sees, because I think you're right, LeeAnn, he's not going to seal that edge the same way as Alex Highsmith. We are going to see some runs get around him, and then it's not going to happen again. Now, that's honestly what I believe. He needs to get beat in certain areas that he doesn't know is a weakness for him right now, because everything I've seen out of Nick Herbig hasn't just impressed me. It's shown me longevity with a football player. I like the passion when he was drafted. I will always remember that video of him practically crying whenever he found that he was drafted. But just I watched the sights and sounds. I actually was waiting for this specific one because I wanted to hear Herbig. And it wasn't just his reactions on the field. On the sideline before that happened, he was hyping himself up so much whenever someone would miss something by an inch, or if he would almost get to the quarterback in the court. He wants everything to be perfect. I wish Highsmith all the best, and I hope he gets back as that wonderful triple revolving door that we seem to have throughout our roster. I'm noticing, I'm putting together an article about the revolving doors on our roster, but the Highsmith injury is not as damaging as it could be, and Herbig is the reason. I'm excited. I'm excited.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what he does. I mean, there was a time when I know a lot of people thought he was just going to move to inside linebacker, and it kind of foreshadowed that they said from the beginning that no, he's an edge rusher. He's the smallest edge rusher in the NFL, but I mean, his burst is ridiculous. And when you have to, let's face it, if you're the Colts right now, and I think Zach had told us a little bit about, or maybe it was in prep, saying that the Colts coach thinks that they can slow TJ Watt down. Well, if you're going to slow
Cooter, the offensive coordinator,
if you're going to slow TJ Watt down, you know you can throw four guys at him, but if you do, then look out for what you're going to find from Nick Herbig. And I know we kind of talked a little bit about this last night in prep. Herbig is 6'2", 245-ish. Anthony Richardson Anthony Richardson is every bit of 6'4" and 245. And if you remember him from the combine,
he's that big?
He's huge.
Yeah, so he It'll be interesting to see if Herbig gets home. Can he get him on the ground? Because, Anthony Richardson, he couldn't hit water if he fell out of a boat passing the football. But as far as just standing in the pocket, maybe I'm going to give him some high praise. Cam Newton, Big Ben, he's that kind of stature where if he will just stand there, he's very hard to bring to the ground. Now, I don't think he's standing there if TJ or Cam or one of those bigger guys hit him like Benton. But Herbig, he may just flick him off like Ben used to do, to much bigger guys and toss it down the field, which is what we want. We want him to stay in the pocket and throw the ball.
Yeah, I did an article yesterday on Broderick Jones. Brooke Pryor had written about it, about Broderick Jones talking about how he learned so much from working with Mick Herbig because they came in together in the same draft class. And he said, you just don't get opportunities to go up against guys who are as fast as he is. So against the Chargers, just to give you an idea, Herbig led the Steelers with a get-off speed of 0.73 seconds against the Chargers. And that was on the season, his average get-off speed is 0.77, which is significantly faster than the league average of 0.96. So if that gives you an idea of just how fast this guy is, Broderick Jones said, no matter how good other players are like TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, and these guys are great, you just don't go against guys like Herbig. He said he wouldn't know what hit him. He'd look around and, where'd he go? And he said, it helped to make him better as a player last year. So I thought that was an interesting and different endorsement for a teammate than what you usually hear. I think the Colts are going to be a unique challenge. I think they're riding the high of that win. They're only 1-3, and we have to be careful we don't play down to them like we're sometimes prone to do.
Yeah,
exactly. Because
the rumor is that Tomlin is telling everybody who will listen in the locker room, hey, they blew us out last year. Hey, they blew us out last year. Hey, they blew us out last year. Don't get confident.
Cam Hayward said he is so petty. He said he's pulled up every mistake that they made. He's showing them in meetings. He's driving it home to everybody about how bad we looked against them last year.
What I'm excited about with because just because Highsmith isn't there doesn't mean we're not going to have a revolving door, because this is where we get to see the first time, I think, of this year where LeeAnn is going to be used in primarily the outside linebacker position. And he's a big guy. He's 6'4", 275. And that's down from what he was. He was a lot heavier. He went down to be able to play this. So I'm curious about it's kind of like the Najee and Jalen 1-2 punch we have in the backfield. You got Herbig with that speed, and so the lineman gets adjusted to that, and then he looks up and LeeAnn's there. So I really feel like Austin is going to be able to use that to their advantage. So I'm really going to look for when LeeAnn's on the field, how we're using him and on what side.
And this is a crucial game for LeeAnn. He's heading into a contract year. He's been very quiet in Pittsburgh. And this is a chance for him to really establish himself and say, hey, right now I'm the third guy, but when Alex comes back and Herbig slips back into that rotational guy, if he can show he can be that other edge rusher, he doesn't have to get home, good against the run, maybe get a little pressure, then it's real easy to see him being, okay, we're going to re-sign you to a reasonable contract as our guy to be that third and fourth edge rusher depth. I think he's starting to get a little too small to play a 3-4 defensive end, but he could certainly play for a play or two. And frankly, for whatever reason, they're sold on Loudermilk. And I will say this because I've been very critical of Loudermilk over his career. As a fill-in, he hasn't been bad. He's played pretty good.
He's been better this season, I think. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? What we've seen has been better than what we've seen in the past, which I suppose is all you can ask for, because the first time I saw him come in, I cringed. But then I was like, oh, okay, this is maybe not so bad. So Arthur Smith, do you guys think that Arthur Smith is cooking up another big game? Is he going to take another step forward with this offense this week? Do you think if Justin Fields has been on this proverbial choke chain collar, are we loosening it another notch this week and we'll see even more than what we saw last week against the Chargers?
I will say this, the Colts cornerbacks are really bad. I mean, I was listening today. I forget who the expert was, but he's a gambling expert on the Starkey show. And he was saying he's steering clear of this game because the Steelers, he said, being favored 2.5 on the road against the Colts, he's like, you can't undersell how much that means people, the betting, the smart money is going to Pittsburgh. He said if it hit 3, then it would get bet down because, it's a home game and all that good stuff. But he said the safest bet in football this week is betting the over on George Pickens because for some reason his over under is set at 48.5 yards. He said he would pound that as far. He said he didn't want to make a pick for the game, but he said he would pound that over. He said it's his number 1 prop bet for this week.
Wow. Yeah, this is what I'm interested with Arthur Smith for this game is I know that Justin Fields has been on a leash. Every single person has, but I think even Arthur Smith has had to kind of keep up with the growth that Justin Fields has shown. And one of my favorite things to do is to say how bad Mark Madden's takes are. And Mark Madden decided that this week he would say that he is furious that the Steelers are making Justin Fields run less. Like, how dare we take away his best attribute and turn him to something he's not? Has he not been watching these games? Because it seems
like he doesn't get reception in his mom's basement.
Yeah.
Honestly, Mark Madden is dead set on making this Steelers season, which is positive. He's already comparing it to 2020, which is just frustrating to me. But what Arthur Smith gets to do is he gets to go up against the 2 worst run defenses in the NFL over the next 2 weeks. It's all over the place. LeeAnn put this wonderful thing together. Look at this. Everyone is talking about how bad the Colts are, and then right after the Colts, the Cowboys are just as bad. They're 31st and 32nd respectively in the NFL. So I know we don't have Jalen, but what this is going to set up is what I at least I think I'm correct, is a key part of the Arthur Smith offense, which is play action. And we haven't seen it too much, but you get that running game going against these truly terrible defenses, then that play action opens up, and the Justin Fields accuracy that we've been seeing, it's over 70%. Yeah.
Which is 73.
73. Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing. So you mix all of that together. I'm just excited about the next step that Arthur Smith is going to take, because I think even he is surprised at how much he's going to be able to open up the playbook this early in the season for an offense this new. And he's been talking about how much fun he had last week, that it was a heavyweight contest, that he was so proud of how his guys stepped up. So there's a lot of bonds already being built that were non-existent over the last 3 years between coordinator and offense. And the guys that have been here for a while, Freiermuth and the offensive, they must be reveling in this, because the confidence that much gives you when you are brought into it, when there's communication, transparency, and you feel included. I think that's a big reason why we're seeing the cohesiveness on there. So Arthur Smith, just keep touting that, because you're doing amazing.
And Tom Arth, I think he really deserves some credit. I think he's getting forgotten in a lot of this. You know what I mean? I think as the new quarterbacks coach, I think it seems like he's doing a good job from what we've seen. We're seeing actual development from a quarterback in Pittsburgh, which we haven't seen since Ben Roethlisberger was a rookie. So, I mean, that's kind of like a remarkable thing. I mean, we failed Mason Rudolph, failed Kenny Pickett. You know what I mean? I think we're doing a good job. It feels like, I know it's early, it's 3 games, but it feels like we're doing a good job getting Fields to this next level. He was on Cam Hayward's podcast today, and I thought it was really interesting. And when I saw he was going to be his guest, I was curious, because I know Cam was such a big advocate for Russell Wilson to come to the Steelers. You know, he had called Russell and talked him into this and all this. So I was really curious what that conversation was going to sound like, and it was interesting to hear how Cam talked about Justin's leadership developing on this team, and how, he's kind of a quiet leader where Russell's like a loud, vocal leader. He said he watches Justin go to like Beanie Bishop and talk to him about, ways he could have disguised, what he was doing better, and, what he sees on the field to kind of help these guys. And he said, that's something that not everybody does. He said Ben Roethlisberger used to do that with the DBs, but that's not something every quarterback does. And so he said, Justin is really establishing himself as this leader. He talked about how happy they all are to have him there. And it didn't sound like the kind of like I have to say this because you're on my show and we're talking publicly and we need to look kumbaya. It felt real. And Justin Fields talked a lot about Russell Wilson and how professional he's been and how this isn't like everybody talks about it's fake. It's not fake. This is genuine. This is who this guy is. Fields said he follows him around all day and takes pictures of like the notes he takes and watches what he does and has been learning to copy his things. He said, why wouldn't I learn everything I can from this guy? So I was impressed with how mature he is. Really mature.
Well, the one thing, if you watch the tape, and Steve Palazzolo talked about this this afternoon about Fields, is what one thing you didn't see in Chicago was in Chicago he would stand there and pat the ball, and it seemed like it took forever. He double clutch throws. He is hitting his back foot if you watch the tape, and he's throwing, and a lot of that is from Arthur Smith simplifying his reads. And we've talked about it before. One of the good things about getting him on the move, and even when he's standing in the pocket, he's doing a good job of giving him high-low reads. And it used on the rollout, it's high-low go, but in the pocket, it's high-low check it down. So he's able to go through the progression of I don't have the deep, I don't have this. Okay, I'll check it down. Or hey, I do have the low. I'm going to gun it, and it's very decisive. He looks like a totally different player. There's going to be some regression at some point. I mean, sure. He's not going to complete. No NFL quarterback completes 73% of their passes for the whole season. If you think Jaden Daniels is going to lead the league in completion percentage, I mean, I guess it could happen, but no. I mean, I think we're going to see that. Although I will say this to Mr. Accuracy Joe Burrow, you better think about dyeing that hair back because you're 0-3 as a blonde and you really don't look very good.
No, he looks like Ellen DeGeneres and he's throwing about as well as she probably does right now.
It's true. Another coach that I think needs to get some credit is being overshadowed because the unit as a whole is not seen as very good is Zach Azzanni. Right now, George Pickens, we are impressed by him in Pittsburgh, but on a national scale, like stats wise and all that, he is not among like the upper echelon where he deserves to be right now. And he is taking it all incredibly well. He is excited. And George Pickens from last year wouldn't have been excited with this kind of production. So I think that's a lot having to do with how the offense is doing and the cohesiveness between them as a unit, the locker room. But I give a lot of credit to Zach Azzanni because that's a big ego that he had to deal with during training camp. And I think the back and forth we saw early on is because maybe Azzanni saw some of this coming. He knew that I'm going to have to make sure George is okay with a certain amount of production that he's not used to. He'll get his catches later on, but this offense needs to win with him sometimes only catching 45 yards, only catching 55 yards. And from what I've seen on Instagram and his body language on the sideline, this is a George Pickens that is maturing because he's enjoying being part of a team, regardless of what he has to do on that field. So I do feel like we owe Azzanni another receiver. I like DeAndre Hopkins, and for me, when a lot of people talk about him,
don't like DeAndre Hopkins. Don't.
I like him very much, very much. Okay. I mean, people forget like last year he was 31, but he had 1,075 yards, and 1,075 yards is a great wide receiver too for us.
Well, so it's yet again. He said he's a receiver who lost a step that he never really had to begin with, and I was like, "Ooh, that's harsh." I was like, "That's harsh." I was
no, he lost a step. He had a step in Houston. I know.
He had a decent season for who he is last season.
And before we break our arms patting George Pickens on the back, and if you guys watch this, you know how much of a fan of Pickens I am. I mean, let's face it, it's real easy for him to be okay with this kind of production when he is the obvious focal point of the passing game. I mean, he's getting the most targets. I thought and it's killing me. I can't remember this guy's name because I thought he was really good on the Starkey show today when he was talking about the betting lines. He said, look, the first week, I mean, the production was good. He had 85 yards. He said last week, it was only 5 catches for 57 yards, but they were key catches. And he's like, the only bad game he had, the Denver game. And he said, it's not even really a bad game because if you go back and watch the tape, Patrick Surtain is interfering with him on almost every play.
every play.
So you held him.
That adversity, Pickens has handled better than he would have handled it last year. I think last year we would have seen stomping around the sideline, cussing and complaining and being angry about that. Do you know what I mean? Maybe even smart comments to the refs or something like that. I think even that stuff, because he was clearly being interfered with a lot. Like I was angry and he was calmer than I was, and it was happening to him. So,
and I think it helps.
That's right. Maybe there is some maturity there.
And I think it helps that he drew those penalties because, yes, it sucks I didn't get the catch in the stats, but you know what? The team got 40 yards. So I'm cool with that because I was the focal point of that play. And then like the touchdown, I mean, it's the stuff I don't like about, when people pick on Pickens about, oh, he's not mature, he's not this, he's not that. He got mad when he didn't get the ball. They took the touchdown off the board. He scored. What a wonderful. I'm still mad they took that touchdown off the board because it was such a spectacular play that he's one of the only guys who can make. But he doesn't pout about it because it's like, hey, it was to me. I scored, but it got wiped off the board. I think he was only upset when they ignored him. When they ignored him, he got mad.
Which is every wide receiver like in the universe. Do you know what I mean? Like that's not new. We saw way worse from Antonio Brown, but because he was Mr. Big Chest or whatever, it was all okay. And I think if, Pickens had a quarterback like a young Ben Roethlisberger and he was getting ignored, you know what I mean? We'd all say it was valid, but you got Kenny Pickett throwing to him and can't complete a pass. And, and Matt Canada is not calling the right plays. And I think there was a lot to be angry about. And I'm sure it bubbled over. It always seemed reasonable to me. I never bought the narrative that he was this like out of control young diva or whatever. I never bought that.
The blocking play was the only one I ever had issue with.
Agreed.
And it seemed like he owned up, corrected it, talked to the people he was supposed to, and it hasn't happened again. But that was the only time that I bristled. So
yeah. Well, I got a question for you. Would it be the height of Steelers' pettiness? And we're not really a petty organization, but every once in a while, we'll throw a little jab in there. Would it be the height of pettiness to turn around and work out a deal? You guys were just talking about DeAndre Hopkins for Russell Wilson and screw Mason Rudolph out of a chance to take over for Will Levis?
Oh, that would be so mean. Mason doesn't deserve that. And it would happen, too. That's how it would go down, too.
Yeah.
Mike Tomlin, one last jab at Mason Rudolph.
Yeah, I'm not mad at Mason. I don't have anything against Mason. I thought he was a class act. So I wish him nothing but the best. Don't beat us or anything crazy like that. But truthfully, I wish you nothing but the best. I thought he was a classy guy that put up with a lot of BS around Pittsburgh.
I just always got the feeling Tomlin didn't like him. Because you look at it.
That I kind of agree with. I kind of always felt like it started with Ben. Do you know what I mean? He wasn't Ben's buddy. Do you know what I mean? And I think Ben can be a jerk that way. We saw it. We heard it. We've heard it from people a lot. And so I think that there's some smoke, there's some fire there. And I think that he wasn't Ben's buddy. And because he wasn't Ben's buddy, Tomlin didn't have a whole lot of use for him until he needed him. And
I think Mason was the first guy who actually wanted to come in and compete with Ben versus, because he talks very glowingly about Charlie Batch, Josh Dobbs, Byron Leftwich, a lot of the guys who backed him up. He had good relationships with. And I think Mason, when they kind of put it out that we had a first-round grade on him and got him in the first round, that he maybe looked at that as like, okay, well, why didn't you go get me a wide receiver since we just lost Antonio Brown?
He admitted it on his show that's what he was mad about. He felt like they didn't need to get a quarterback. He felt insulted that they even did it. And that was, not what he asked for.
Yeah.
And for like a petulant little kid, he was going to be determined to like not talk to this guy or ignore him or whatever.
Yeah. And he's in good company, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers to some extent with Jordan Love. Very few starting quarterbacks embrace.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to train this guy to take over for me. especially
I mean,
especially if they think they got time left.
Not uncommon, but I mean, in Ben's situation, I think you need to recognize that, like, hey, I play this brand of football where I get hurt. You know what I mean? And what matters most is the team. And so I need somebody to be able to step in for me. And so I never quite understood why he was so hard on Mason. But speaking of backup quarterbacks, did you guys see Duck Hodges' tweet yesterday? Somebody had tweeted out, like, who was the last Steelers quarterback to go 3-0 in their first 3 starts, and he retweeted it and was like, it was that dude who dates the hot country singer now. Hey, what was his name? Seemed like a good guy to have a beer with. I thought that was a good one.
He seems like he's having fun. He had his like 15 minutes in the sun, and his life is good, and so he gets to look back on that. I mean, I think he understands he's lucky that not very, very few football players that had his like very limited time as a starter get to experience life as good as he has it right now.
Yeah.
So I think he's just having fun, and it's none of it is petty, none of it is mean, none of it is. It's just fun. So, and I like.
Like,
I think
he was a Ben friend. They went hunting together and do whatever like redneck Western Pennsylvania guys do together. Do you know what I mean? They were in that weird club. Any other key matchups you guys are thinking are critical for this game coming up against the Colts? Anything else you're really looking to see other than the clear TJ versus everybody mismatch that the Colts somehow think they're going to win?
You guys think that cause I don't think it had anything to do with Roman Wilson that he didn't play last week at all. That was just Arthur Smith specifying what roster he needed. But what do you guys think he's plays this week? I'm excited to see Roman Wilson. I just don't know when we're going to get to see him.
I think he does. I mean, I'm hoping he plays. I mean, I guess, LeeAnn talked about Terrell Edmonds getting elevated this week. I hope that's not at the expense of Roman Wilson, because I think I don't know how viable a plan it is to go into a game with 3 wide receivers. I guess Van Jefferson is probably going to play with the eye, but I mean,
he said he's okay. I mean, he was healthy, he was practicing, so supposedly he's okay. But even still, I mean, you're talking 4 wide receivers and the Gulf of Mexico between George Pickens and the next one. Do you know what I mean? It's a big gap there. Do you know what I mean? Now, I don't know, does Roman Wilson slot in there? Is that number 2? Is he a legitimate number 2? Is he ready for that? I mean, I don't think any of us know until we see him, actually play a professional down of football, if he's ready for that.
I mean, I think if he does play, it'll be packages. I think he'll have if he flashes, there could be an easy jump to say, okay, this is our guy. But I think if they do put him on the field, it'll be in very specific.
We're going to ease him in. Yeah, they're definitely going to ease him in. I think so too.
Yeah, because it's easy on paper. Because on paper, straight up, I would say, well, absolutely, Roman Wilson touches that field. He's a wide receiver too. But then you think about it, he's a rookie. The expectation, there's a lot that he has to prove he knows. But I agree with Bob. He'll start out here and there in some small areas, but he hits the ground running. I guarantee Arthur Smith is going to say, okay, plan B is ready. We're moving to wide receiver 2 and has a separate set of packages because we have a competent offensive coordinator. He can do that. I will take every chance to just trash Matt Canada.
Yeah, I want to say it was going back to the TJ thing real quick. I want to say it was Steve Owen, who was the Giants coach in the 50s, who, if you ever want to read about an interesting guy, that is Vince Lombardi was his offensive coordinator and Tom Landry was his defensive coordinator in the 50s for the Giants. And I think they were playing the Rams with the high-flying passing attack. He's like, hey, what's your plan to stop the Rams? He says, hope the bus driver gets lost on the way to the stadium.
Right.
So I think that's the only viable plan for TJ is like, let's hope maybe his cab driver or Uber driver, he doesn't show up for the game.
Look, once a long time ago, I made a comment on Twitter. I don't even remember what it was now because I was so traumatized. I blocked it from my memory. But I clearly talked trash before a game and said something that I thought was so obvious that it made sense. And I ended up on Freezing Cold Takes that Sunday evening. Do you know what that is? The Twitter page where they make fun of you because your takes are so shitty. I ended up there. It was humiliating. I totally feel like if you're talking about especially something as obvious as TJ Watt, you need to keep your mouth shut. You know what I mean? Talk about it later. If you beat TJ Watt somehow, then later you can be like, yeah, we had a plan for him all along. But otherwise, you need to be quiet. Like the odds are not in your favor.
Yeah, and TJ would be the first guy. I mean, if they turn around, throw 4 guys at him, say TJ Watt is not going to beat us, and the rest of the defense goes nuts, TJ will be the happiest guy in the field.
Yeah.
I genuinely feel if we win this game the way we're supposed to, and prove that this is not the Steelers of the past. We don't look at the like trap games, won't play down. This upcoming schedule is very, very interesting because there's a bunch of the so-called trap games. Other than I think Bob said the Jets concern him the most. LeeAnn, out of those, which one, if any, concern you that could not a trap game, but that could be a legitimate challenge? Do any of those look like that to you?
I think the Jets are probably a legit challenge. I think the Raiders, for some reason, we always struggle with. I've never understood what that is. It doesn't matter how bad they are. Like a 7th grade team could show up and play in place of the Raiders, and we would still, for some reason, have a little bit of trouble. And I heard that Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell are going to be at the tailgate that day. So maybe there'll be like bad karma coming to town. I don't know. But yeah, I think that sometimes is trouble. But as far as like who I think is a legitimate possibility, I think the Jets have a solid defense, and Aaron Rodgers, if he stays healthy, he's unpredictable and very talented. I mean, just a talented guy.
Exactly. So I see this. I mean, I think the reason I brought this up is because a couple of days ago I saw on Twitter, I forget whose take it was, but they were talking about an 8-0 going into the week 9. And I right off the bat I'm like, oh well, that's just stupid. What? And then I looked at the schedule. This easily, without getting my hopes up, is a 6-2 to 8-0 record going in as long as we play like we are. And I expect us to get better. I don't expect this to be baseline. Our baseline is going to keep getting better as we go. So this schedule, I think, is really going to set us up well for what that second half of the season is. And LeeAnn, what you said earlier was very true about the AFC North. I don't care if the Browns come into this not having won a game from this point on, because AFC North teams play each other in a microcosm. It doesn't matter what's going on outside of that. We are the only 2 teams that exist at that time, and that is our Super Bowl. Well, I remember the Browns have celebrated like it's been ever. So every team, especially if we're that good when it comes, AFC North teams are going to come for us. And even if they don't beat us, they're going to want to leave us bloody. So somehow that second half of the season is still going to be hard. And then Hard Knocks. I keep forgetting it at the same time.
Well,
so yeah.
One thing about the Browns, keep an eye on this Myles Garrett thing, because if he's gone, I don't think they have to lose very many more games before they realize, hey, let's get the best draft pick we can get and get rid of Watson. So I think if his feet are really that bad, we could easily see them shut him down before they even get to us on the schedule.
All right, guys. Well, let's hope that next time we talk, we are celebrating our 4-0 season record so far, and be looking forward to that.
You're gonna do some predictions?
Oh yeah, let's do some predictions. Great idea. We're winning.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all I got.
No
problem. I never say by a lot because I think we win close games, whether we like it or not. But yeah, solid win. 21-12 or something.
I'll say 3 touchdowns for the Steelers, 3 field goals for Boswell, and we'll win 30-13.
Ooh, I love that score.
Okay, well, last week I said if Justin Herbert played, it'd be 19-10. It was 20-10, so I feel like I'm closest to the pin so far this season, although I know Zach is going to come up with the exact score at some point. I think they'll be a little bit conservative with all the injuries. I think they want to protect Najee a little bit. I think we'll see a lot of Cordarrelle Patterson in the second half of this game. I think we jump out maybe 14-3 in the first half, and we end up winning somewhere in the neighborhood of 24-9. I think Colts will end up with 2 or 3 field goals. Jonathan Taylor might punch one in. So 24-9 is what I'm thinking.
I think it's going to be hard to shut Taylor down 100%. Yeah, see something from him. Well, guys, if you made it this far, we sure do appreciate you. Please feel free to drop us a note, Give us a follow. Let us know what you think. Let us know what your thoughts and predictions are. We definitely want to hear from you.